Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Let's talk about the full moon in Pisces and Mars ingressing into Libra. So those are going to be the two main things I will talk about today. However, with regards to Mars ingressing into Libra, I will point to some of the major aspects that will be occurring pretty much in the month of October, which is next month. So I might come back and actually unpack some of those in greater depth. So I'll just flag the dates and the actual aspects today, with the potential of coming back to talk about them more in depth later on, because there are some pretty significant aspects going on relative to the journey of Mars in Libra. So we are basically approaching the equinox. It is in the southern hemisphere. It's the spring equinox for us, which is it must sound so unusual for those of you in the northern hemisphere. That is that we have spring, in September, and our summer, of course, is in December when it's snowing in in the northern hemisphere in various parts anyway. But I have lived here most of my life, you could say, so I'm just very, very used to it. And I do get the question quite frequently, how does that work with the the tropical zodiac, in terms of Aries representing new beginnings, birth and spring, and Aries being the 21st of March, which is 0 degrees Aries in terms of the tropical zodiac, and how does that fit with the model of new births and spring and so forth, because it's not spring here in March for us, it's actually autumn. So the answer to that question is not something I'm going to answer today. I don't even know why I brought that up, but I did. I guess it's just something that seems to sort of come up as a question mark in people's minds. But I've found that working with the tropical zodiac here in the southern hemisphere, it works. It's very effective. Well, okay, so we have a full moon in Pisces, which began at the new moon in Virgo, and it was picking up an aspect from Neptune at that time. That is the new moon. So the new moon cycle that began 2 weeks ago, or virtually 2 weeks ago, in Virgo, was picking up an aspect from Neptune. So the polarity Virgo Pisces has been extremely emphasized in the ether. And virtually 2 weeks later, we arrive at the full moon, where the sun is in Virgo and the moon is in Pisces. And it's the same energy again, because the sun's in Virgo, the moon's in Pisces. It's a full moon. So we are talking now about a greater sense of clarity and illumination by the definition of a full moon. But the factor that we need to consider very, very strongly is that transiting Neptune in Pisces is forming a conjunction to this full moon. So Neptune has been very prominent in this particular lunation cycle, and Uranus has been particularly prominent in this cycle as well, because it was forming a trine to the new moon, and Uranus has been very active in the last few lunation cycles. So Uranus, Neptune, and then of course we have Pluto, which is squaring Eris, and and is still a very, very volatile sort of energy, you could say, particularly with the square to Eris, which is still incredibly active and prominent. And so I've said recently, in the last few videos, that the energy of what we're feeling is just really amplifying and intensifying on a daily basis. And that's obviously because of the current narrative and paradigm that we are experiencing on the 3D Earth plane. So the full moon in Pisces has quite a few different levels to it, and we can consider it from we can consider it from a spiritual, more esoteric level, of course, which we will. And we also can consider it and understand it from the everyday 3D plane. And that's also important just to understand the mechanics of that as well, because we do live in a 3D dimension reality. This is a pretty sensitive, for lack of a better word, full moon. First of all, full moons are usually describing an energy where the ether, if you like, is quite amplified. It's quite volatile. It's there to see, you know, for better or for worse. The full moons are always they always connect to matters on the earth plane, and of course in our own lives as well, where things get amplified and heightened for better or for worse, right? And so stepping into this full moon, it does have a quite a subtle vibration and energy about it, because it is Pisces, the archetype of Pisces. And Pisces is not overt and direct and dynamic and in your face. Pisces is the complete opposite to that, really. It's of the mystical, it's of not of this reality. It's incredibly intuitive, mystical, sensitive, psychic, confused. You know, there's a lot of themes that can come up. And because of the presence of Neptune, it is a very, very magnified Pisces full moon, because Neptune is holding that energy, and Neptune is the ruler to Pisces. So it's a very, very sensitive full moon. One thing that I've noticed of late, and I find this really powerful actually, and again, it doesn't matter what side one sits on relative to the narrative in the present reality. This is not about beliefs, although Pisces is about beliefs, and that's one of the at a personality level, one of the downsides to Pisces can be the fanatical ideal belief that a particular person or persons hold as it needing to be the truth for everybody. And as I often say, truth is a pathless land, a quote that Krishnamurti came up with a very long time ago. And really simply, it just means that we need to discover our own truth. There is, I feel very strongly that there is one ultimate truth, but there are many truths that get us closer to the ultimate truth. And that is the path of the soul incarnating into this physical body and desiring the multitude of experiences that it desires in order to evolve. And hence truth is a pathless land, because the map that you have in your psyche, in your soul, in your life, that unfolds for you at all the different levels that it does, is neither right or wrong. It's just what it is relative to your soul's desires, as mine is with my soul's desires and my evolutionary journey and your evolutionary journey. So inherently there is no right or wrong, as it were. And I feel that that's such an important point to always remember, you know, especially at times like this when there's just, you know, such severe division that's been cultivated, unfortunately. And you know, as far as I can see, it feels and it seems and it looks as though the powers that control and dictate this narrative are really fostering this division, and it's got nothing to do with truth. It's got nothing to do with beliefs. It's just got to do with a particular story and narrative that's being played out. And one thing that is for certain is that love and unity is the most powerful source. So when you have a narrative that's trying to diminish unison and create division and have this storyline suggesting that, not even suggesting, but in fact mandating that you can't spend time with your loved ones, you can't go and visit your family, etc., 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 which is basically what's happening here in this country and has been for a long time. You know, you've got to sort of ask the more philosophical and spiritual and esoteric question, and not just perhaps stay with a narrative where the mind is fixated on, well, this is what they are saying, so this must be right. So the science says that, you know, if we do this, then we'll all be safe, etc., etc. And we we know that that's not actually the truth, right? So again, this is up to us to keep an open mind, to explore, to investigate, to question, to think about. But I was just going to say that this, I find it very interesting that what I've noticed of late is that universally, at the moment, there are a lot of silent protests taking place. And it's a very wise move and very smart move to create silent protests. And when I see a silent protest or I think about that concept, to me, it just resonates so much with Pisces, the energy of Pisces and Neptune, because those energies have nothing to do with, you know, assertion, action, anger, conflict, war, division, and so forth. And so the power that is love, that is unity, is also in the silence of the silence of the silence. So silence is extremely powerful, a lot more powerful than the noise. So, you know, there are people from the police force, from the emergency services, ambulance, nurses, there are even doctors that have actually united. And it's not a question of telling anybody what to do or what not to do, but it is a moral obligation to allow people freedom of choice. That's an ethical and moral necessity in law and life. And so when that is taken off the table, that conflicts with our God-given right to sovereignty, to choose freely. We are all given a free will, all of us, and we exercise that will to make the choices that we do. So if Source has granted us the gift of free will, who is to say that a man can dictate to you what you should do with your free will? How does that morally and ethically sit okay with you? It doesn't sit okay with me. So again, it's not about shaming or wrong, making others wrong or demonizing or vilifying, which is what's happening to the minority. And it's not about the minority doing that to the majority. That just takes us into the very intention and purpose of what this narrative was was instigated to create. So, you know, we have a duty to our own self to recognize these sorts of things, you know, to recognize where do we stand in the truth inside our own self, with our own sovereignty and our own God-given free will. I really love the Sabian symbol for this full moon, so I'm just going to start with reading that before I bring up the chart. Yeah, I was just saying about silent protests, actually, that, you know, I see that as a part of the, well, first of all, the new moon, as I said, had Neptune as a main energy into the seed of that new moon. And now 2 weeks later, which is what happens, we have a new moon. 2 weeks later, we have the full moon. Neptune is there with the full moon. So this thing about silent protesting, I see it directly linked to this Neptune Pisces energy. And as I said, silence is extremely powerful, because the very fact is that, a very simple example, and not everybody can do this, and I can completely understand, but if you stand in front of somebody and somebody is attacking you aggressively, you know, through their words, for instance, the wisest way really to handle that situation, to disarm the person in front of you, is actually through silence. Because if you're not reacting, then you've taken away their ammunition. It just diffuses it. You know, it's a basic psychology. So when we have silent protests taking place, the authorities don't really have a reason to do what they might do when things seem to be louder and more dynamic and more active. So it's a very smart move, and I'm seeing it a lot. I saw it actually just take place here in Australia today with the construction industry. So it's happening everywhere. I've seen a lot of it in Canada. There's a lot of people coming together, and I think it is important for people to come together and support each other's decision, whatever that may be, and just stay away from trying to make one side wrong and one side right. And the Sabian symbol for the full moon is this. It's the 29th degree of Pisces, because the full moon is at 28. Light breaking into many colors as it passes through a prism. Prism, prism, not prison. The keynote: the analytical power of the mind necessary for the formulation of life processes in their many aspects. I think that's a really powerful Sabian symbol for this full moon, and that's something that each of us can reflect on and meditate in our own private space relative to that full moon in your own birth chart. So, you know, the first thing to look at, of course, is where does this full moon pass over in your birth chart? Where is Pisces in your birth chart, in other words? And from a collective level, a universal etheric collective level, this is the keynote is merely highlighting. It says the analytical power of the mind necessary for the formulation of life processes in many aspects. And that's just really reflecting the matter that there are a diverse ways of thinking, perceiving, choosing, and living. And diversity is healthy, and it's necessary as well, because diversity allows each of us to be our own unique self. We are not all the same. We're not here to experience the same things. We don't have the same perspective on things. We each need to be unique, which is what we are, and experience our journey according to our soul's desires. So whilst there is this unity and love at the highest level, in oneness, where there is no separation, we can hold that state of consciousness inside us from the point of view of staying aligned with that to our best capability, because it's really virtually impossible to be in that state 24/7 in this 3D reality. And that's simply because we are experiencing life through a physical vehicle, a physical body, and we are subject to the laws of the 3D reality from the point of view of our body experiencing all the different things that it will, such as aging, such as illness, such as whatever, and any of those things. So those things nobody can evade. We all go through them at different times. That's the whole. We are subject to that because of this physical domain. But relative to our consciousness and the state of awareness that we are aligned with, that can be mostly connected to that sense of oneness and no separation. But in the form, in the physical 3D form, we see the diversity, we experience the duality, we experience this sense of being born and then eventually what we call death, which is merely a transition into the soul world, if you like. Because the soul is infinite, it's immutable consciousness, which means it can never be destroyed, but only change in form. So he goes further to say that cycles of existence begin in unity and end in what I have called multi-unity. That's an interesting comment. Cycles of existence begin in unity, meaning in oneness. That's God's source, creation to all things. And in the end, he says, they end in multi-unity. And to me, when I think about that comment, I understand that as saying that there's the ultimate source, creation to all things, which expresses itself through the diverse expression of every human being. That's the multi-diversity. Then he says, at the stage of consummation, the many individual differences are totaled. They constitute a sum. Within that sum, a unified total. The inevitability of the future process of differentiation is implied, because every cycle leaves a mass of waste products slowly returning to the unconscious state of chemical matter of humus. H-U-M-U-S. Humus, however you want to pronounce it. Which basically means, I was just looking that up because I actually wasn't, the organic component of soil formed by the decomposition of leaves and other plant material by soil micro organisms. What the symbol tells us is that unity will always break again into multiplicity, thus evolution, thus infinity, thus the soul being infinite. When the soul re-emerges back to source, then it's in that complete and utter state of unity, right? And when it descends and takes on the form, it is then again in an environment of multiplicity, duality, and diversity. He says there is no, after the last statement, the prism is always there. There is no absolute unity. If anything could be called absolute, it is the relationship between the one and the many. I love that statement. I think that's a very, well, it can be interpreted in a number of different ways. But again, my interpretation of that, it's this whole paragraph that I've just read is really just pointing to one source creation to all things and the diversity and multiplicity that and multi-unity, multi-diversity, multiplicity that is inevitable when the soul takes on the physical body to have an experiences in this 3D earth plane. So what does that say about the full moon? Well, I guess it is, in one way, it is reminding us of the ultimate truth being unity and love and source that we are an extension of. And on the other hand, it's also reminding us of the multiplicity of things as well, and how we need to, I suppose, navigate our way through that, especially at these particular times. Have a reflect on that yourself, obviously, and see what those words mean to you, if anything at all. But I personally love that particular Sabian symbol. I think it's extremely powerful because, again, it's going to point to yes, no. There'll be the yes and there'll be the no, and that's the multiplicity. That's the diversity within the whole as well. Okay, let me just bring up the chart, the full moon chart. Before I do that, well, actually, I'll do that first. So here is the chart for the full moon. It takes place on the equinox, which is when night and day are equal, fairly close to it. And the equinoxes are always symbolic of new life, new birth, resurrection, and so forth. And so to have a full moon with Neptune present during an equinox time, it really is a birthing of new light coming through. And there is a lot of that going on, because with this model of reality that we are experiencing at the moment, it doesn't matter what belief system or philosophical orientation one holds relative to their own stand in what they are perceiving. It is clear to all of us that there are significant shifts and changes going on. Now, people perceive that and relate to that and understand that in a myriad of ways, and that's fine. it is no one can deny the fact that there is significant shift and change going on, whether you think about that on a practical, realistic, day-to-day level, or whether you feel that and understand that through philosophy, astrology, esoteric subjects, etc. And the equinox, which happens, during March and September every year, both in the southern and northern hemisphere, but bringing up different seasons for the northern and the southern. They are equinox means equal day and night, basically, right? So there's a very special spiritual activation, if you like, of the light at that time. So it's very beautiful to have the full moon in Pisces conjunct Neptune during the equinox. I feel that it's somewhat comforting, but again, at a mundane everyday personality level, the Pisces Neptune full moon, the most typical thing that it can bring is confusion, mass confusion, because Pisces and Neptune and the 12th house all correspond to the collective unconscious. So this Neptune there with the full moon will really be reflecting the collective unconscious and the state of that at the moment. And the state of that collective unconscious at the moment, regardless of which side you sit on, holds a pretty significant level of confusion about what is actually going on, and again, what is actually truth and what actually isn't. This has been in play for quite some time, but the point is this full moon will really be reflecting the mass collective unconscious state through the lens of Pisces. So at worst, it's a complete, total, utter state of confusion and complete uncertainty of what is going on and what to do. And at best, it's the very deep connection from a deep soul level of a new reality that's being born, a new ideal, Pisces. I don't think it's easy though to just kind of stay aligned with the ideal, as it were, that the new reality that's being born. But I think we kind of have to, because that is what's happening. And so the ultimate shift I feel that is taking place and will continue to take place is the shift in our own consciousness. The concept of a fifth dimension reality and a third dimension reality is not so much about what you see on the external, but rather the consciousness within. What reality are we tuned into? What paradigm are we tuned into? So, Pisces, of course, carries with it that complete and utter confusion. And then, of course, there is the components of disillusionment as well, feeling completely disillusioned by, what's going on around you or what's going on in the world. There's the matter of victimhood, feeling victimized, and there are many people that are feeling victimized at the moment, and it's really understandable because they are confronted with a set of circumstances that's threatening the very livelihood of what they've created and built, over a long period of time. Then there's the matter of sacrifice that comes up as well with Pisces. And so what are the sacrifices that we are willing to take or needing to take or wanting to take based on our current circumstances. And of course, with Pisces, there's no sense of boundaries. Certainly, no boundaries with Neptune either. So that, this full moon, I think, is just tuning us into the collective unconscious and everything that's going on at very, very complex unconscious levels. There is a lot of potential with inspiration, spirit, divination, divine source creation to all things, altered state of consciousness, tuned into other realities, the veil being lifted so that you can actually see the truth. In evolutionary astrology, it is said that Neptune is the body that corresponds to the ultimate truth, because Neptune is the body that corresponds to divine source creation to all things, spirit, divinity. And if the veil is being lifted at this time in a passing sort of moment, if you like, we can actually connect to a glimpse of another reality. And again, that's up to us, how much we are tuned into this full moon, how receptive we are. There'll be a lot of people that won't tune into this full moon in Pisces in these ways, because what will possibly be triggered for a lot of people is, as I said, confusion, disappointment, disillusionment, uncertainty, and of course a great sense of sensitivity and empathy and sympathy for for what people are going through, because there are a lot of people suffering tremendously through what is going through what they are going through. So it's the full moon in Pisces with Neptune is each of us feeling each other's pain and suffering, you could say. But it has a flip side to that coin, because Pisces can be both bliss and ecstasy and or agony, right? That's the essence of Pisces. So we're likely to tune into a number of different matters relative to these sorts of states in people's consciousness and in people's lives. And there's a greater sense of compassion with Pisces always. So there's a greater call or feeling towards accepting and being more understanding of everyone's position, whatever that may be, without judgment. Pisces is not about judgment. Virgo is about judgment. Pisces is not about discriminating. Virgo is about discriminating. Pisces and Neptune is the energy that it dissolves, form, boundary, structure, any of those things. And hence why it opens all of us up to this collective soup mix of everybody's inner unconscious state. So a very, very sensitive full moon, very sensitive. And of course, there's a side where, people will just be experiencing altered states of consciousness, whether that's through meditation, whether that's through substances, whatever it is. Everyone kind of has their own different experience. But Pisces is everything but this reality before us. So if that's what it opens us up to, then, the opportunity is there for us to experience something other than this Saturn harsh reality as it is at the moment, particularly at the moment. There are some good aspects, not that Neptune is not a good aspect, it just can be a very challenging aspect. It's very subtle, as Pisces Neptune energy is, but subtle never implies not powerful. Okay. Now, the other interesting things about this full moon, of course, is that Mars recently ingressed into Libra, and it is actually conjunct the Sun. Okay, so it's opposite this full moon, really. Okay, so not only do we have Neptune as an extremely strong presence, but we also have Mars here. And Mars in Libra is, I think it's a very interesting time at the moment with Mars in Libra, because again, it's just bringing up the matters of law, the matters of fairness and justice, and the fact that that's quite a prominent issue universally at the moment relative to the rights that each individual has with the choices that they wish to make. So Mars in Libra traditionally is in its detriment or exile, whichever word you want to use. So it's not the greatest place for Mars. Okay, Mars rules Aries. What's the opposite sign to Aries? It's Libra. Okay, so that's how detriment situations kind of are explained. All right, you have Mars in the sign that is ruled by Libra. Pardon me, that is ruled by Venus. And Venus and Mars energies, well, one's a lover, one's a fighter, just to put it very simply. So Mars in Libra has a few issues to deal with. First of all, Mars is, the desire and instinct to act and be assertive and fight for your rights and for who you love and what you believe and so on and so forth. And in Libra, it is fighting for justice. That's what it's inherently trying to do. But Libra is not a sign of conflict or fighting. And so Mars really struggles in Libra. It's like it has this awareness of, I know what I need and I know what you need. And my dilemma is, how do I please you without ignoring my own needs? That's the fundamental dilemma of Mars in Libra. It's the very delicate balance of the Aries Libra polarity, which is, how do I maintain my own sovereignty, independence, and freedom, while at the same time understand your needs, and I'm able to facilitate and nurture and participate in the needs that you have as well. So that's the fundamental dilemma on a personal level relative to Mars being in Libra, whether that's you have Mars natally in Libra, or Mars transiting in Libra in your chart at the moment. Of course, wherever Mars is transiting, it's just basically energizing that area of life. That house that Mars is transiting for you at the moment, it's going to inject some fire and energy and will forces into that area of life. Now, if it's in Libra, it's clearly going to be speaking, it is in Libra. I mean, if your Libran house, it clearly does speak to, at a very personal level, our relationships. As I said, how do I maintain my sense of independence and freedom and autonomy, whilst at the same time understand the diverse needs that you may have, the different needs that you have? Libra enables us to understand the diversity and differences in all people, relationships, and situations. But Mars is a very self-oriented, self-directed energy. It's about self. So it has to compromise in the sign of Libra. And it's not an easy thing to do, because what can frequently happen is that it can do so much to please everybody else, and the people pleaser is a Libra syndrome. And so anybody who is constantly needing to please everybody must have very strong Libra in them, for one. But ultimately what happens is that the polarity Aries is just getting suppressed. It's just getting knocked out, not given any room to breathe, not given a voice, not given a chance, not given its own right to be. And what does that do? That just builds up aggression. Aries, aggression, suppressed by Libra. Libra trying to make everything look beautiful, presentable, non-argumentative, and at the cost of what it needs itself, Mars. And so the backlash is the suppressed anger that just blows up like a pressure cooker. It's a very delicate balance that we must consider with Mars in Libra. That's at a personal level, okay? There's much more to it than that. They're just a few concepts to consider. So it is about honoring our own instincts, whilst at the same time being able to understand the differences in others as well. At a law level, it is going to bring up a lot more desire towards fighting for fairness and justice, but fighting through Libra, which is not through conflict. It's through peace, harmony, and love, and balance, and law, and understanding the diversity, understanding the diverse needs that people have. So I'm very curious about the journey of Mars in Libra. And as I said, I will come back and do another video because it's worth doing. There's just some very interesting, where's my mouse, aspects going on. And what will happen is, I'll just show you. Okay. So I'll just animate the chart and just show you moving forward. Okay, so the first sort of major aspect, if you like, just say something there. Yeah. Okay, so by the 1st of October, Mars is opposite Chiron. It's a very significant aspect. I'll come back and talk about that. By the 8th of October, Sun-Mars conjunction in Libra. Very, 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 very powerful aspect. Very powerful. A Sun-Mars conjunction, regardless of the sign, that the sign is going to add, a very specific tone for sure. But a Sun-Mars is, these people are fighters, okay? So this is the fighting warrior energy being completely activated during this time, even though it's in Libra, okay? And then by the 10th of October, we have a Mars-Mercury conjunction in Libra, okay? That's obviously going to be around law matters again, okay? Court cases and so forth. And that's obviously, our own ability to speak up for what's fair and just as well. Mars, having the confidence and courage to assert what's fair and just and balanced, Libra, and communicating that, having the voice to communicate and articulate that, Mercury. Very simple astrology, but given what's going on, these things are extremely important. Then by the well, I'll get back to that. There's a trine between Mars and Saturn, and so that's really good. But 19th of October, Mars is trine Jupiter. That's very, very hopeful, a very helpful and hopeful planetary aspect there. And the right at the end, which is going to be, I think, incredibly pronounced in the external realm and reality, is when Mars forms an opposition to Eris, the goddess Eris, the goddess of discord and destruction, chaos, waking people up from their slumber. Mars forms an opposition to Eris and an exact square to Pluto. So that's a T-square between Mars, Pluto, and Eris, and that's happening on the 22nd of October. So realistically, those days around there with that particular T-square, I would be expecting big things to be going on. I will come back and discuss that in greater depth. One thing I wanted to show you guys, which I found extremely interesting. Oh, actually, before I go there, let me just go back to this. So back to this full moon, the sun is trine Pluto. And so therefore it's actually sextile the moon. Okay. So Pluto's presence is very important in this full moon as well. And Pluto is always about evolution. It is always about transformations and letting old things die. And so forming a trine to the sun and a sextile to the moon, which is the full moon, it's suggesting that there is a supportive energy from Pluto to help us in that process as it looks for each of us individually. Okay, so that's very reassuring. The other thing that I really liked about this full moon, Mars being conjunct the sun, is also forming a trine to Saturn here. Okay, it's an applying trine. So in a few days' time after this full moon, Mars will be trine Saturn. But it's picking up that trine to Saturn in this energy of the full moon. And this is good. We really want the full moon to be supported with the more malefic, difficult energies. You know, we want it to be supported by those more harsh, difficult, challenging, dynamic energies that sometimes the dynamic component is the very thing that's needed in order for very specific change and action and assertiveness to be activated. And there are other times when we need that energy to be a little less confronting and a little more less conflicting and more integrated into our own will forces, which Mars is our will force and Pluto is our will force. So I like the feel of this Mars into this full moon and Pluto. Okay. The other thing that was very interesting is that there's an asteroid called Proserpina, which is the equivalent of Persephone. Persephone is the Roman name and Proserpina is the Greek name, but there are two different asteroids in terms of two different bodies, one being called Proserpina, one being called Persephone. But in terms of their mythology, they both generally describe the same themes or signatures. And the asteroid Proserpina is actually conjunct the sun. So she's opposite the full moon. And I think that's pretty significant because Proserpina, who is Persephone, was abducted by Pluto. As we know, the myth, daughter of Ceres, abducted by Pluto, became queen of the underworld, etc., etc., etc. The point here, I think, is her presence with this full moon is again showing us. I'd like to read something actually. Just a couple of comments about Proserpina. Okay. Representing a metaphorical descent into the underworld and the soul tests this entails. the energy of Proserpina is, she can be fairly passive, because there's a need to go with the flow. There's a need to go with the flow of the energy, okay? And the lessons are basically around the path of self-empowerment, which is very much Pluto as well. And Proserpina can also bring about mystical experiences as well. And essentially, Proserpina's energy in this full moon is triggering what could deeply impact the development of your soul's evolution at this time, because both Proserpina and Persephone are archetypes that take us through the very deep, stark realization that nothing is permanent and that we must die to be reborn, and that we must find the ability to detach, to allow ourselves to grow and to evolve. Because the tendency is to create attachment and hold on to everything, and fear letting those things go. So Proserpina or Persephone is a reminder that death and rebirth are not only necessary, but part and parcel of the same sort of field, if you like. So her presence is very strong in this full moon. I just thought that was interesting as well. Now, I just want to make a couple more comments about Mars in Libra. And I was thinking about which celebrities, famous people have Mars in Libra. And it occurred to me that Bill Gates has Mars in Libra. And the first thing that came to my head was the smiling assassin. That would be Mars in Libra. Why smiling assassin? Because Libra, which is ruled by Venus, Venus is what corresponds to a smile. Venus rules smiling. When you see somebody smiling, that's a Venus expression. When you see somebody frown, angry, ready to kill, that's Mars. It's a very distinct difference. So if Mars is the body that could potentially kill, and Libra is the sign of that Venus rules, which is about peace and smiling, and which can be very, very fake and superficial, then Mars in Libra can very easily describe an individual who is the smiling assassin. And the person that I just named could very easily be given that title. Very easily. Now, here's what's more interesting than that. So I looked at his chart, and so there it is, Mars in Libra. You can see he's got Mercury in Libra, and you can see Neptune is there as well. Now, most people would say that Mercury-Neptune conjunction is very wide, and it is. But is it a conjunction? Does Neptune influence Mercury? Yeah. One thing I've said through several videos is that one of the most typical aspects that we see in politicians, it seems to be extremely prominent, Mercury-Neptune aspects. So it's kind of like a prerequisite. If you're going to become a politician, which means you need to lie, you've got to have a Mercury-Neptune aspect. There are many other features to Mercury-Neptune, by the way. It's not all, doesn't have to be just that, of course. No archetype means just one thing. Now, if you look at this triple conjunction down here, Mars, Mercury, Neptune, and you can see this with your eyes, it's so obvious. Mercury sits in the middle of Mars, Neptune, doesn't it? So here we have the smiling assassin, and his actions and motivations and desires are very hidden from the public because his Mars is in the fourth house. So I think that's pretty interesting. And what he thinks about too, what he really thinks about. Now, Mercury is sitting in between Mars and Neptune. So what does that mean? It means that Mercury is at the midpoint of Mars Neptune. There's a whole area of astrology called midpoint structures. The midpoints are such a powerful tool in astrology to understand midpoints. You will gain so much insight and understanding into archetypes and patterns and themes in your chart that cannot be described just by looking at the surface level of a chart. Okay, I highly recommend studying midpoints. Now, here's what's said about Mercury being at the midpoint of Mars Neptune, and I'll leave this for you to interpret in your own way. For me, it just stands out like I was going to use an expression that could be quite vulgar, so I won't use it. It really stands out. To me, what I'm about to read is just so blatantly obvious. Okay, so Mercury at the midpoint of Mars Neptune. Thoughtlessness. Thoughtlessness. That's how he starts the very small little paragraph sentence actually to what it means to have Mercury at the midpoint of Mars Neptune. Thoughtlessness, nervous weakness in consequence of drugs or misuse of energy, weakness of mind, sensitive nerves, many plans without a chance of realization. So have a think about that relative to this particular individual based on the role that is playing in this narrative, which is a very significant role, as I'm sure most of you are aware, and think about what does that mean, what I just read, I mean, in consequence of drugs or misuse of energy, weakness of mind, thoughtlessness, many plans without a chance of realization. Yeah, potentially very dangerous in the wrong hands. And, Mars in Libra is the smiling assassin. And I mean, frankly speaking, whenever I've noticed this particular individual be interviewed, he's always got this kind of fake little smirk and these beady little eyes. The smiling assassin with the sun in Scorpio, there's the beady little eyes. So yeah. Anyway, I just thought that was quite interesting. I just wanted to mention that. Okay. Oh, and I want to leave with something very inspiring. So what's happening during this time of this full moon is that Mercury's position, which is 2333 of Libra, is actually forming a conjunction to the fixed star called Spica. And Spica is an incredibly powerful star. And there's a lot of fixed stars, and there are some that are just, when you read the description, they're pretty scary. They can be pretty scary. you know, it's like it's pretty black and white of what they mean. You know, if it's a star that brings bad luck and terrible things, then that's just what it is. It's very difficult to make it something else. They represent what they represent. So the fixed star Spica is considered to be one of the most spiritual stars. It is absolutely tied into divine blessings. It's a really, really beautiful, beautiful, beautiful fixed star that promises great rewards, and it also promises keeping one out of harm's way when there's either negative forces or danger lurking. The fixed star Spica has the ability to just, it's like it just picks you up and pulls you out of danger zone. And I can personally relate to this because I have Spica exactly on the midheaven of my chart. Exactly on my midheaven. So Spica is a very powerful star for me, and I resonate with the frequency of this particular star. But in this case, what's happening is that Mercury is passing over this divinely beautiful, blessed star. And what is Mercury? Mercury is the messenger. Mercury is the planet that has an androgynous energy about it because it's neither male nor female really in essence, or it is both, right? And also Mercury is the only planet that was able to go into all the different worlds, and it's able to retrieve messages from the unconscious and the conscious. So Mercury being conjunct Spica during this full moon is such a beautiful omen for our own inner download of beautiful divine wisdom. It's a gift of some type of knowledge and wisdom and understanding that Spica is gifting us through the powers of the messenger, Hermes, Mercury. So just something else to consider that is very beautiful and very powerful. So if you have, Spica sits at the moment, about 24 degrees of Libra. And when I say at the moment, it's barely moved. Okay. When I was born, it was virtually 24, right? So fixed stars are called fixed for a reason. They don't move around the zodiac like the wandering stars do, which are the planets. The planets are wandering stars. The fixed stars are fixed. Okay, they do shift. Okay, that's a whole other presentation, teaching level, whatever, and it's not important for the purposes of what I'm sharing today. They do, but the point is that they do move ever so slightly, and it takes many years for a minor movement to happen. So generally speaking, just about everyone on the planet would probably have Spica at 23 or 24 degrees of Libra. Okay, so if that sits on your sun or your moon or your Venus or your Mars or your Mercury or any of the other planets, or on one of the angles, ascendant, descendant, MC, IC, then Spica is one of your very powerful stars that's guiding you in ways that, unless you really tune into her, you won't even get the full benefit, really. But you're looked after, really. You're looked after. So have a think about Spica, and just, even if you don't have her prominent in your chart anywhere necessarily, just think about it from the point of view of this full moon and just her offering to us as being conjunct Mercury during this full moon. Yeah, okay, so yes, I've covered everything that I wanted to cover. Thanks for listening. I hope that you have taken something away that's useful and helpful to you. at this time. I am very behind in creating some classes. I'm very well aware of that. Just how it is. So that's where I'm at. I do still intend to create further classes and workshops, and eventually putting my whole course together in a online forum, matter, platform, etc. It's really just a case of putting it all into something that people can access, right? And I might even hire somebody to do it, because I'm not particularly tech savvy, and I just don't have a lot of patience for stuff like that either, if I'm going to be perfectly honest. So anyway, we'll see how that goes. But there's always the opportunity to have lessons with me on a one-on-one basis, and I can tailor those lessons to what you need. So that's a great opportunity, because then you're not locked into a 1 or 2 year course. You might have a really good basic grasp of things, and you might just want to sort of really hone in on aspect patterns, or how to understand certain asteroid goddesses, or the Venus star point, or whatever it is. There's lots of different things that I can offer relative to what you might need. So that's just an idea that I'm putting out there for people to consider if they wish. And of course, if you want a chart reading, and I do many different chart readings, and again, those are based on your needs, of course, always. So feel free to contact me for any of those things. And there are a couple of Venus workshops that I'd created, one earlier in the year and one towards the end of last year, that are still available on recording if you would like those. One is 7 hours long, one is 3 hours long. So some really valuable information in those workshops, because the approach is very much from an evolutionary and traditional level of astrology. So it's highly valuable. What else do I need to say? I think that's about it. So I'm going to leave you now and send you beautiful, beautiful full moon vibes for when the full moon arrives. I think it's an important time as well, just to be able to really surrender and trust in the divine plan, because surrender and trust and faith are words that correspond to Pisces. It's letting go of wanting to control the reality, Virgo, and stepping into a space of nothingness, if you like, where there is no form, there is nothing to sort of stand on or anchor into. And it's a bit like free floating, and just kind of flowing into that energy and allowing it to take the different shape that it might, or morph into what it might morph into, or bring into your consciousness whatever it will. But it does take tremendous surrender ability, and I think that's something that all of us are challenged by, in one degree or another. So a Pisces full moon, again, is a reminder of surrendering into the divine plan. That, I guess, some people might have a difficulty with that, because the word surrender might carry with it a perception that if you surrender, you give in, so you give up, so you've failed, so you've given over your power. And that's a very personality Mars position, if you like, because Mars never wants to lose, right? And it never wants to surrender or give up. But I'm not talking about giving up or giving in. I'm talking about surrendering into the divine plan. Well, what is the divine plan? Well, the divine plan, there is a collective divine plan, and there is an individual divine plan. So we need to become more attuned to the divine plan that has been written for us individually and personally. And so I can't tell you what that is for you unless we sit down together and, work through your chart, and we work on that together, if you like. But point is, I can't tell each of you what that is for each of you. But Pisces energy does invite us into that space, into trust and surrender and faith and letting go and believing into, well, what word could I use for that? It's tricky because the word belief it can create problems. We know that, because people get persecuted for their beliefs. Countries go to war for their beliefs. So, the word belief has these connotations and things around it that can be a bit of a problem. So perhaps I'll remove the word belief. But trust, anchor into a sense that is greater and bigger than our own self and this physical 3D reality. And that's what Pisces enables us to access, the altered states of consciousness. And finally, and this is perfect timing for this, Rob Hand has some great quotes. And this particular quote is 100% perfect to finish this video and to remind us of what Pisces and Neptune are about. So he says, Saturn, and I have said this quote before, some of you may have heard it, a lot of you would not have. And you've got to listen to this very carefully, and you've got to understand your astrology to really get what he's saying. Saturn is the illusion that there's only one reality, and Neptune is the reality that there are many. And one other thing, which is going to sound a little bit weird to sort of leave off with, but it does remind me of Pisces and Neptune, and that is that the only thing that's clear is that everything is unclear. And I think this Pisces full moon will have that kind of sense about things as well. And so the more we try to hook onto the external stories and narratives and timelines and securities and so forth, that the more troubled we'll probably feel. So it would be wiser to surrender to the divine. Much love and see you soon. Thanks for listening. Bye.